Go to TradeNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 22nd. Well, we had the brief dip here below, and what I mentioned on that dip was the reversal. We'd already started to see at the open as the red was already starting to rise back up. Same with magenta here, still slightly below, so it's not crossed back over, but within a fraction. And again, we pointed out the ABM value that we had right there was at 41.35, and anything above that, bias was to the upside, and that's exactly what happened. And not uncommon to what we see when we get this starting crossover, particularly when we're still in bullish trend, because the blue is still above the green at this particular stage. It's just you get some soft periods when the red dips below, and as long as it stays above, you're in an upswing. And that's the easiest way to describe that. Not to mention, we've had steel from a complete reset. We talked about it. As soon as it starts to pop up, that would be enough for short-term buyers to push things, which they came in just in time, right as the dip came, because it started from well below here, but broke into the new zone, which was enough to give it a jolt from a gold standpoint. Also, in that uptrend, a little bit of softness going on right there with that NBI reading, and of course the euro continuing its juggernaut as the devaluation of the dollar continues. Turning to the intraday. So we started off pre-market there as we were hitting the short configuration coming in, and we got the NBI with the old white dot, which turns into the dark green. Buy signal came through pretty good, and then we ended up with the beginnings of what was weakness, and it kind of held up right here. This is something we talked about before, where that green dips below and it comes, the yellow dips below the green and comes back outside of it. And even though you're in that slight weakness, without continued breakdown of both the yellow and magenta, you tend to get those little pops, and we'll talk about where we see that a lot in these little ellipses that I drew. From that point, though, ended up with that perfect buy setup that led to the big move, and then this is where we get into a series of these lovely little ellipses that I wanted to talk about, where we get a configuration when we're in this consolidation, and it usually happens up here above the 76% range and near the 100. Clearly, as I pointed out, when we get the breakdown and you have red below blue and the magenta below yellow that's below that 33 level, and I start to see rising white configuration, yeah, it's technically weakness, and you can see the softening goes, but what I point out that you really, the expectation is for that yellow to continue down and drop below green. And whether it's a rising green or whatever, it won't matter, but that's what you're looking for. And so when it pivots and makes that reversal, we talked about this on the Skype chat, where a little bit later I had entered over here when we were in the plus 50 range, and it was like, okay, yeah, you've got the short, but if I see this kind of reversal take place where that magenta moves back above, then I know my short's not going to follow through. And I'm working on the conditions for that, because these are identical setups in all of them, and they all happen at relatively the same point within it. So it makes it easy to make that reversal, and that's where you capture those white dots come back pretty quick, because they're recognizing that momentum shift of the pivots up of green, blue, and that white moving above that 19 level, and it captures it. And sometimes, though, it's up near the high. So the idea is, well, you could be long from the original one and stay with it. True, but oftentimes, even within that, then you get this configuration right here where it doesn't make that reversal. And when it does make the reversal, it's doing it from a much lower concept point, which right about here is where you have the uptick. That's language I'm converting, because now what we've done is we've parsed the market to where we have the individual setups from either a magenta candle or even the white, and then we can work within, instead of just creating broad setups, you can have very specific ones tied to where the shakeout is, and those various ideas of the cyan under red which are usually bullish. In fact, almost always bullish. The rare cases when they're not bullish would be configuration right back here, where the cyan is above, the steel is above cyan, and then it crosses below, and you would need to see an immediate reaction within a couple of bars, like usually by this direction here. And I would expect steel either to be below the -13 or pretty darn close to it. And you can see, you've got everything. You've got the magenta under, you've got the red under blue, and it carries through. And it's slightly before the magenta would take place, because that's looking for the cross of blue underneath, which is normally fine. You're giving it some range. It's particularly useful if I've seen positive extremes from before, and I'm likely to get a fill on those. So taking that higher stance early. But again, those can pivot up even at these, higher elevations. You can get the little step ups. So it's a little bit, I would say, more advanced. It's just a little early. You have to have things go exactly as you expect. And then within that, it's not hard to notice when you get that magenta move back above the yellow, and each time it occurs, it's pretty clear what it's doing. Unfortunately, it's fast enough now that you're not allowing for a huge move to the upside. I mean, it's relatively a couple of points in this particular case. Even with the lows within there, you're getting pretty close back to the even status down at the 53 right there, and you had plenty of points within there, and then right when it flipped, it's just a matter of waiting for a little softness within that, and then boom, it did carry way up. And of course, making all these positive extremes, working those as we go. But at the end of the day, they filled a pretty decent chunk of those right back in here. We still have some down in the 40 levels for later on when we see some weakness come through. So that kind of gives a little update to it, and putting these ellipses on it, and you can see that it's identical. Working the language with it right now to see if we can create a caveat that will end that, so it's not as big a disrupt, but it doesn't make it wrong in the sense that you can still get this kind of continued breakdown, which leads to multiple points from a drop-down standpoint. And that'll do it for now. I sent out an update for this paint bar, and I'm working on the one that will give you the dots here and explain what you're seeing with those, so that you just have that, because that's the current work I do on looking for setups and that will be definable. And then lastly, hopefully this weekend, I'm going to start putting them into actual strategy elements that you'll be able to see, okay, if I'm buying the white dot, I'm getting, the likelihood of X percentage with X stop, and how much I can expect from a profit factor, that kind of thing. So that'll be good. As always, trade well. We'll talk to you later.